start the discussion.
All right, we already have 30 people here, so
Yeah.
good time to start, Gaurav.
Yeah.
I remember how GraphQL GD started. I mean, how we came up with the idea that we should have a separate GD just for GraphQL, because in the last backend GD we had a lot of discussion on GraphQL. So
Yeah. And there was a lot of like pros and cons we were discussing, so we thought of like let's just have a separate GD itself.
and also a bit of misconception among people about like what GraphQL is and why you should use it, or why REST is just okay and all those things. So we can talk about all those, touch all those points.
Sure. I think we can just start with like giving some basic idea, because I think most of them has not started like explore GraphQL right now. So we can just give them an overview about like what is GraphQL and discuss about how it was evolved, and then we can go by that the difference between the GraphQL and the REST APIs.
Let me pause my notification of Slack for a while, otherwise it's gonna create some problem. All right.
Sure.
So where to start? Why first? What is GraphQL?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you think GraphQL is?
So for me, the GraphQL is like a query implementation on the REST calls, like just a single endpoint where you can query multiple things and get the data, like without actually having separate endpoints for each and every data resource which you want, like in normally the REST API which we do, right?
Correct.
So it's just a query interpretation, nothing more than that. Like it doesn't execute any query, like it just converts a simple JSON query convert into the format which the database understands, and then executes it. It doesn't does anything apart from that. That's the basic understanding what I have.
Yes, so it's not a framework, it's not a library, it's a spec, it's a protocol.
Yeah.
It's a protocol. Okay. So let me step back a bit and see like how GraphQL started. Like we have been building APIs in REST, right? And we have used RESTful APIs like post to create, and then say get to fetch, and then patch to update, and delete to delete. So those things are like basic, resourceful endpoints. That's what we get with REST API. But when it comes to things like I want to query some particular relationship, or I don't want a lot of fields, I'm interested in consuming just this particular thing. So those things, people start to write their own pattern on top of REST. I'll give you an example. So let me share my screen. All right. I hope everyone can see my screen. So for example, like api.github.com and say /user/Sanket Sahusoft, right? It gives me a bunch of details about this user. I get more than like around 30 properties. But say if I want to show an avatar of a GitHub user with this name, so I wouldn't need all these things. I would just need avatar URL, right? So what people have done in the past with REST is that they usually add something like question mark fields is equal to, and then they send avatar underscore URL comma something else, right? So the backend REST endpoint implements it in such a way it parses fields from the query string, and whatever is available, it just sends that. And say if I want to fetch all the repos of this user, so what I'll do is as a RESTful engineer, or someone who is working just with REST, I would go ahead and add something like relationships is equal to say repos. So this would start fetching me repos. So before GraphQL, everyone was doing something like this with REST with their own implementation. They didn't have a standard.
Yeah. And everything was in the query parameters, and or they were customizing the endpoint itself, like creating a separate endpoint.
Correct. And there was no guideline like how to do it. Everyone had their own style and protocol of communicating over REST with the things what I need from the server, or say if I want to create a new endpoint or call some procedure. So there's a different way of doing. So this entire thing, this query string is converted to a GraphQL protocol. And this can be represented by say something like say fields. I'm interested in only avatar URL. So I would write something like this, and then I need the relationship repos. Inside repo, I just need the URL of that repo. So I can request something in this format. So this is a GraphQL protocol. This is a object shape what I'm requesting for. So all the rest eventually evolve into something like GraphQL. And if you use GraphQL, then you automatically open your APIs to a bunch of toolkits and all those things. So that's
and also
yeah.
And also it gives a lot of flexibility to the front end. Like every time, whenever you need any new field or anything which the existing database doesn't have, you just have to modify your existing schemas, and the new field will be added to your to the client application. Like you don't have to again depend upon the backend servers to modify the endpoints to just get a single field, that extra field for you.
Yes. So, yeah, those are the advantages. And one specific diagram which I really like, I'll just show you. GraphQL explained with burgers. So this one. Oops. So for REST, it's like yourapi.com/burger. It just gives you the entire burger. But with GraphQL, it's like get query and whatever customization you need. Like I just need the bun or patty or anything like lettuce or something like that. So you can customize things. Whatever you need, you just query for that. You don't need the entire like something which is like available as a preset, but you can customize things. So this is a good example of GraphQL versus REST.
Like it's a perfect example. Like whatever you need, you fetch it. There's no overfetching, no underfetching.
Correct. Yeah. So these are the problems with REST API calls, like overfetching and underfetching.
Yeah.
Okay.
And another point which I think GraphQL solves is like, since there's only one endpoint and there's only one transaction happens, so most of the data is fetched in one shot, rather than REST happening like you call one resource, then again you don't have the data, then you again call that another resource to get the data. So there's multiple round tripping happens in REST APIs, which
Correct.
GraphQL solves like with nested queries or with schema design. So yeah.
Makes sense. And also it's typed, like unlike REST, you have there's a term introspection API which GraphQL exposes, so you can check the data types what's available in the backend and then design your front end according to that. And since it's typing, so you also get really nice toolkit with TypeScript and all those things.
Correct. I haven't tried like too much with the TypeScript. Like I have most of the time used with plain JavaScript. So I'll definitely try give a shot with the TypeScript and how does it work. And auto suggestion and the schema typing will be there. So
yeah. It's good if you can generate TypeScript types from the GraphQL endpoint. If you can do that, then you don't have to like manually write that.
Okay. And another question like comes around the GraphQL is like it will just replace the REST. Like GraphQL will replace the REST. Like most of the conversation which I have heard, like going forward, like in 2020 the GraphQL will be there, or in 2019 the GraphQL will replace completely REST. But I don't think so. Like REST is completely different thing and GraphQL is completely different thing. Like they don't, like GraphQL tries to solve a particular use cases, and REST is a solution architecture which you can have like different resources which you get, like get, post, CRUD, anything. And GraphQL is just a query language. It doesn't solve anything. Like it solves a particular problem, but not a bunch of problems.
I think you're breaking a bit, Gaurav, there. Is it you or is it my connection? Just a second.
Let me check my internet.
Let me check.
Can you guys hear me?
I think that you are breaking up a little.
Okay. Let me check my Wi-Fi connection. I can use a mobile. Actually, it's my end, so I'm just checking if. Now it's better.
I think it's better now. I can hear you properly.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. So we were talking.
We were talking about the people saying like the REST GraphQL will completely replace the REST. So about that perception, I think REST is completely different. Like it's a solution architecture which it has its own resources and lot of use cases. And GraphQL you provides a solution for a particular problem, like having one endpoint to fetch everything data and not having a multiple round trips of things, a round trip of data to fetch a particular thing.
Yeah.
And also GraphQL has a very good schema language where you can easily write the nested query. Like it's a very human friendly where you just type in and irrespective of how much level of nesting it is, it will automatically convert into the corresponding SQL joins and fetch you the data. So as a developer, I don't have to do lot of break my head how I will join those queries or how will I create a constraint around it. So GraphQL has a pretty good spec around it.
So you're talking about the libraries or the ecosystem of GraphQL, which is available, which helps you achieve those things very easily. For example, Apollo Server does that. Yeah.
Yeah, Apollo Server. Yeah, obviously the community around the GraphQL is increasing, but I'm saying that even in the at the basic level of GraphQL syntax AST, which GraphQL provides, those are very easy to read and easy to develop. Like we can easily write nested queries, custom directives we can build, custom resolvers we can build. So there's not complicated code which we have to write just to create a layer around our database. So it's very easy. That's what I wanted to convey.
Correct. Makes sense. Good stuff. So what are you using in the backend? Like Node.js, which particular server library are you using for GraphQL server?
So most of the time I have been using Node.js with Apollo server, so that has worked well for me. But I have been exploring like Laravel and the Ruby and Rails GraphQL Laravel. GraphQL Laravel or GraphQL Ruby and Rails frameworks are also there, but I haven't tried too much. Most of the time I have spent using Node.js and Apollo server, and Apollo server is great, like Apollo client, Apollo servers, and the cache mechanism which it provides. It's amazing.
Yeah,
like we don't have to write too much of code. Everything is they have already coded, and it gives you exposure to very simple APIs which we can directly integrate.
Makes sense. So see, what I miss in the Node.js side is availability of good ORMs in terms of, say, if I want to add relationship, and then maybe I want to say add say whenever a user object is created, I want to send an email. So event system, and say if I want to take that email sending procedure to a job or to a different thread. So those things are a bit difficult to implement in Node.js. And that is what I like about Ruby on Rails, Elixir, and Laravel PHP.
This kind of like use cases I haven't come across with GraphQL. Like my was more over the data fetching part of thing, like not on the emailing or creating a job queue. So, but I think we can achieve using like custom resolver we can create and then create a Node.js service, microservice, because GraphQL has a good, because GraphQL can easily interact with the microservices. It's just a layer, right? So you can easily build different microservices and then pass it those, call those microservices inside your resolvers. So those kind of things might help you in if you are using with the Node.js itself.
No, I'm pretty happy with the GraphQL engine, Apollo server, and all those things in Node.js. It's more complete than any other language that I really like. I'm talking more of in terms of a backend solution. Like if I have to implement say GraphQL on top of a backend of my choice, so I would choose something like a bit more complete. I think it boils down to again the last discussion what we had in the backend GD about say Node or event based backend versus non-event based backend, or Node.js versus all the other types of MVC frameworks available. And I feel that Node is very much on microservices oriented architecture. So you have to add a lot of pieces yourself, like email send out or jobs or crons, and all those are really disconnected. and these things are really well proven with things like, say, Ruby on Rails, mainly Ruby on Rails and Laravel PHP. So, but yeah, that's a different story.
So you have explored like in the GraphQL Laravel side or on Ruby on Rails side? Which one you are using as a backend solution?
I'm using Laravel PHP. There is a plugin called Lighthouse, which is really nice, and it directly maps to my ORM, that is Eloquent ORM, that maps to tables.
Okay.
I'll quickly show you.
Okay.
Just a second.
Yeah.
Yeah. So say I have this particular model. So I have a project model which has user ID, name, and team ID, and a bunch of relationships like user, team, alerts, things. So if I want to consume this particular backend model or expose this model to a GraphQL endpoint, I can just go ahead and define that in my schema.graphql file. And as soon as I do this, this is a type defined for the project. This automatically maps to the Eloquent model, which I have in the backend. And then I just add this query. And everything is intact. So everything starts working. Like I can start querying project with ID, and then I can ask for all these fields, which is defined over here.
Okay. But in this, like all this thing, like just by adding a single line in this, or the heavy lifting has been taken care by the GraphQL. You don't have to write much of the code in the at the Laravel side. Like, yeah, you can just query it simply querying it using like your normal Laravel command, like which we have, but not doing any heavy lifting like the authentication part or your or maybe the job queue which you have. So this all will be handled by Laravel GraphQL or by Laravel framework itself.
Laravel framework itself. So the only piece here, the Lighthouse GraphQL is just a gateway to the Laravel framework, you can say, and everything else then goes back to how you handle things on the Laravel side. So this is what it makes available, and then it finally boils down to the Eloquent data model that maps to a database table. And everything is like normal Laravel project. Say we have jobs table where we exec file and do all those things. Pretty straightforward, I think.
So yeah, pretty straightforward. Yeah, it's then it boils down to the Laravel framework and the GraphQL, like it's so how you normally code it. Okay.
Yeah, on the front end, people usually use Apollo GraphQL client or Urkel, but here we have used something else. Here we have used MSTGQL, which generates all the data models for me in TypeScript. So the project model, which is in the backend, it has an equivalent model in Mobux state tree for me, which is available over here, project model base. So everything is generated automatically here. The corresponding front-end model for that backend model is also generated. And then
so it's like,
yeah, go ahead.
So you don't have to write any extra code to generate. It's like a plugin kind of thing which you are integrated, and it will generate the models for you. And
yes, so it calls the introspection API of GraphQL and detects what are the queries and types available. Against each type, it creates a front-end model for me automatically, and this is fully typed. So I am fetching this in dashboard PSX, and here I can just say store.query project, which is a query available in my GraphQL, and the front end I can just consume it, and now this becomes a fully typed this thing for me. So I can say project.name, and I also have my functions here which I have coded on the front end side, like change name to something else. It changes name in the front end.
Okay, and this plugin is only available in the Laravel, or it's like really open source and this can be integrated to any other language?
This has nothing to do with Laravel. This works on GraphQL endpoint. So if you have a GraphQL endpoint, go ahead and you can generate all your Mobux state tree model for your GraphQL endpoints. So you don't have to write all those queries and things like that, and you start getting everything in the front end.
That's pretty awesome, because then the heavy lifting, like I don't have to do manual work of like creating the maintaining the schema between the backend and the front end. I can directly get exposed to the
Yes.
backend schemas
yes.
in the front end.
Yes, and this is not just the schema, but this is a model which you can actually change. So, like project model which I showed you, I can I am using something like say change name and then create local file. So these things, these are the functions which I've typed on the front end, which I need in the front end. Say I want to say for file content. Sorry, this is project, right? So I can just open file model.ts, and then it has bunch of things like say change name and add file content, mark unsaved. These are my own functions, and whenever I call save against that particular thing, so it automatically syncs this front end model to the backend via GraphQL.
Okay. That's a pretty neat way of writing the code, and yeah, sure. I'll also try this thing at my Node.js level and get get back to you on that, like how it helped me. Right. And Vikram has also worked on this Elixir and the Phoenix, as Sarika mentioned. Like, do you want to give some insight about those frameworks, like how GraphQL is helping you there, Vikram?
Actually, I think that the library is available for me. Like there is a lot less code to write. Most of the code is like auto-generated for me.
So you just create the schemas and then just consume those things. That's
yeah. So for example, like I can show you. Just a second.
Is closing all the torrents and YouTube tabs.
Actually, I'm using the system preferences to allow it to be.
Just kidding.
Okay, I'll leave it. So actually, I just write a command, and it generates a total of 3 files. Like it generates a model file.
Your screen is not shared, Vikram.
Actually, I'm having problem with security settings.
Okay. I think I have the video which you sent to me.
Yeah.
I'll just share my screen and show that. Can you? Okay. I think Vikram sent. Sorry. Yeah, cool. So this is how it looks like. Vikram, would you like to?
This is where the GraphQL schema resides. These are imports for all the types. It is a little messed up because the client has written everything in the same file. There are limitations. And in any query or mutation, we have the last function as resolve. And from there, you can go to the function that is the resolver function. We use pattern matching for that. And the models reside in a separate tab. So here are all the models. For example, this is the Coston model. So we have for database and type. This is like a to.json from JSON utility. And these are the functions to handle everything with database. So for example, for the utility find questions inside radius, we have this, and this is the formation of a query. And last thing, we have migrations. So migrations are written like this. That's it.
So it's like pretty much standard way of like how we do it in the Node.js Apollo server. Yeah. So pretty much similar to that.
I think it's very similar. All the backend MVC frameworks are very similar. Be it Ruby on Rails or Python Django or Laravel, all are very similar.
And the next question which I wanted to understand, like, how do you access, like, if authorization, like, let's say I want to access only particular field, like I don't want the client to, who doesn't have a read permission or who doesn't have a particular permission, those cannot access the files. So you go with a custom solution, like creating custom directive or custom wrapper, or you have any other solution in which you do it in your Laravel or any other thing?
So there are two parts of it: authentication and authorization. Authentication is handled the way you want it. If you want it using token system or JWT token or basic auth or session based anything, so that that does not belong to GraphQL. Inside GraphQL, and then when
GraphQL has
sorry,
you continue.
GraphQL.
I was saying, like, GraphQL has never ever stated any way of like providing any authentication. Like they have really say like whatever way you want, you can handle it. But what is the standard way which you follow for authentication? I was going like I can create like custom server, HTTP server, which will handle my authentication, and then GraphQL will be then redirect my request to the GraphQL server. Or one of the common approaches which I have using is like using a custom resolver, like create a common function, a resolver, and integrate that common resolver everywhere wherever I wanted my GraphQL queries to be exposed. So what other approach you are using?
There are two parts of it. First thing, authentication, and then is authorization. Authorization as a role-based access of some particular fields, right? So authentication layer is on a total different separate layer, like based on, say, if you want only the authenticated users to enter the GraphQL engine, so you just have it at a layer above that. And when it comes to, say, role-based access control of some particular record or maybe a particular field in the record, so first thing is how you notify GraphQL about executing specific things against that particular property. So that can be done in resolver or in a directive, right? So you can say say can or @admin and things like that. You can attach it to different queries and mutations. And again, it boils down to how you want to implement it. Usually, when you want field level things, you write it in resolver functions. So when you are resolving, say, a particular field against, say, an object, so it goes via resolver, right? So you can add a hook at the resolver level. But authentication can be at a total different layer, like JWT or anything like that. In my current project, API Baby, we are sharing the token of the Laravel session. So it's normal HTTP based token. So because we are not writing GraphQL queries for an external system, we are consuming it within our website itself. So we want to share it with the logged in user only.
So basically, you have your own web page and your server running at the same thing. So you can add a session cookie and then send it to it. So it becomes easy for you to manage the authentication.
Correct. Yeah. So we are using monolith, but with microservices, it would be different.
But is it a good practice to have like I understand like creating microservices help you out, but the authentication should be a part of your GraphQL level itself because you need the user context. If you don't get the user ID, user information, then you cannot do anything. And there's only single endpoint which you have in the GraphQL, right? You don't expose multiple endpoints. So is it a good practice to have it at the GraphQL level, or no? It should always be at the separate handle at the servers in microservice.
So usually we have a different microservice just for authentication. Just like, say, we have it in AWS. What do they call it? IAM user, right? IAM user. So using that, there's a separate microservice, and that gives you a token, and then you can use that token to query different microservices. So once you query, say, DynamoDB or anything like that with that IAM user token, so internally, DynamoDB and other microservices request the same IAM user from the backend to check and verify that token. So it depends on how you are building it. If it's a monolith, then you won't need it. But if you are having mainly in the Node.js ecosystem, it's usually like two different servers. So that's totally fine. But if it's a small project and if there are like less than, say, 10,000 concurrent users or something like that, so you can actually just have everything in one single server. You don't need multiple microservices for that.
Okay, so yeah, got it. So when it is like performance, then only go with the microservice. Otherwise, it's fine if you handle it at the
Yes.
server level. So,
Yeah, I think
when you have to scale the system into that, you will always go ahead with a stateless server infrastructure, right? Stateless in the sense like
yeah.
you don't create a session at a centralized place, which can become a bottleneck, and that's why the JWT token comes into the play, which is a stateless.
Which is strictly, and it contains the user information to other
Yeah.
signature part, and
So
becomes
all
easy.
so any of the services can just go ahead and decode that token and utilize that service, right?
Right.
And you can keep a lot of information into that.
I'm not a big
That
fan of JWT token.
But when you have to build out a distributed architecture, there is no other simple way. You will
No, but-
always create a bottleneck into your session management when you scale.
It's a bottleneck, but it's also, I mean, like say Google login. Google login is stateful. I mean, it's session based, so it provides you a token, and then you can log into your Google account and then say sign out from all devices, which you can't really do in JWT.
Yes, that's true. But yeah, I think that will have a different kind of a things. You will have to implement a logout functionality with the JWT or
Correct.
a middleware which will do your basic session management maybe.
Correct. So when it comes to things like that, then I said better we can use this token based key value pair sort of thing, and key value pair on distributed architecture, it's not really tough to query and do things like that. So again, it boils down to what you want to do.
So I would say like the front end engine, right? Always your the web app, right? Which I always consider as a middleware server, right? That is not your backend at all, right? Even when you're writing an application onto a Node.js on Express, those are mostly your middleware servers, right? The actual backend servers will be at a very different layer. And when those backend services are interacting in between, then I think JWT plays a very bigger role into sharing those information internally, right? When you are creating a session, that is most of one of the use case at a API gateway level, right? Then it makes sense to have session for that particular user, because you can divert user to different servers as per your geographical reasons and other things. But when you are writing a lot of services around and which are interconnected, then you need a stateless way of interacting in between.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Distributed AI completely makes sense. But Pratik, when you said like the web server act as a middle server, then what do you mean by that? Like all the heavy processing and data DB operation are happening at the other servers, and is the web server is acting as a proxy server?
It's when you scale your application to a large scale. Let's take an like example of a e-commerce system, right? When you are placing an order onto the most of the user interface, what is happening is you just clicked and you paid and your order is placed, right? There are a lot of other things which happens behind the scene. Now the engine needs to submit a request to the courier company for the pickup, and it has to send out an email to the other vendors. It has to send out a lot of other transactional things has to be happened, right? To make that order actually placed into the system. And those can't be part of your web front, right? You can't keep everything, all the logic over there. If you do that, you will have a very complex system in place. So that's how the newer architecture of microservices which comes into the play, right? They says like you create order processing as a service and then leave it, right? The backend system will manage about calling the API service for the courier company, sending out an SMS, sending out an email, right? All those goes into your backend layer. So I say like application has to be distributed into two parts or two groups properly, right? The backend services which are mostly of a task oriented, workload oriented, right? Which are doing non-interactive work for the end user. And then your middleware service most of our interactions kind of a things, which goes and interacts with your application, right? You can't have your, like say when you're doing an order processing, you do not want the user to close the browser if you are calling 10 more APIs from the front end, right?
Yeah.
Right? You don't want that, right? The user has completed the order and they will just close it immediately. there might be 5 different calls still pending from the user end, right? Create a order book, create a courier company. So you don't want the user to wait for those information, and then those things goes into the background of the actual application layer.
And most of the things we can also have a job queue in place, because most of the time when we are
so
building a
job
big
queuing
application,
is one of the part of the backend processing, I would say.
correct.
Right.
So,
Correct.
sorry to interrupt. Gaurav, do you use any sort of job queuing in your current Node.js backend server?
Right now, I have created at the in memory level, but as such, I have not using any third party, because most of the time the processes, the request which I have handled is that like it can be managed easily with creating a simple queue which I posted into the database and pull out one by one after every interval of time, pull one record from the database and process it. So,
all right,
nothing as such like Ruby and Rails or Laravel.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah.
And coming to other part of the GraphQL, like, do you use any state management? Like with the application which I have built till now, I haven't felt like using any third-party state management like Redux or Mobile, because most of the time the Apollo client which I have used handles like the caching layer, the data manipulation layer, and everything. So, what's your thought on like using state management with GraphQL?
So I have a question. Where do you store the logged in user information? So do you cache that particular request?
Yes.
And then whenever you need that particular name, say the name of the logged in user, so you request the same query again?
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not the right way, but yeah, but most of my cases which I have been handling were pretty straightforward, and I didn't feel like putting another state management in place, like to just have additional data computation, because I can do it in my GraphQL client itself, and rather than avoiding any not heavy, but another management layer to just manage my data.
How about form states? Just use state?
Yeah.
Okay. So it depends. It again, it depends on the use case. Say if you just have an application which is heavily based on backend data and forms, more of CRUD, then you might not need it, because all the form state, like I can think of only two types of objects which we need for the front end store. One is form state, which these libraries like Formic and those things handle really well. And then if you have good caching of, say, the user's self request, we usually call it me API. So to fetch the request of the logged in user. If you have a specific GraphQL endpoint which is cached, then that works well. You don't need any particular state management library. But if you have an application which shares a lot across the application, say something like BuilderX, so a state management becomes really compulsory. That even if the backend API is GraphQL, which just say gets me the project and the files, I can save that back to the GraphQL endpoint. But there is a lot of local state in BuilderX that I have to handle, like the current state of rectangle which is being drawn, and then the mouse movement and all those things, which is shared across the application. So in that case, state management becomes really important. But Apollo client also has a local state link, which is quite tedious to manage. In my experience, I wouldn't say that it's tedious, but in my experience, I haven't been comfortable using that. But again, I have another question. Say if you have to implement, say, shopping cart, do you have anything like shopping cart?
No, in my application, I didn't build any shopping cart. But what's the use case of that? Like,
say if you have to
clicking and
say if you have to build a shopping cart in your front end application, which works 100% on the local state, and which is shared across the application. Say you have 5 items in your shopping cart, and then you tap on that, it shows all the items in your shopping cart as a list view of that. So these things are shared across the application, right? This needs to be stored in the local state. So you might need to use maybe say React context or Redux or mobile, something like that, for things like that. So
I would say onto that, like you need a state management when you are developing an application, not a web page. So you need to understand the difference between a web page and an application first, right? Because most of the applications are some kind of a offline application, I would say, right? When you're building an application where you want to pre-boot and keep your application active for a longer period, you know the user is going to be active onto the application for a longer time, and he's going to interact a lot, right? Then you need a proper state management in place, right? Without a state management, that will be a big miss, right? Say an example, I will take a data part, right? So let's take another example, a data grid, right? You see a data grid and you have displayed it onto your page from the data perspective, right? But now say all the users who are loading that, some of the people are editing any of one of the records, right? Now you want to go ahead and update all the information for all the different clients who are looking at the same page, right? Think about implementing this thing without the state management. How difficult it would be, right? And then having the state management in place and just emitting the change to all the users, then you can sync all the users with the information very easily.
Yeah. If we have a state at one place, then it's easy because the source of truth is one and everybody can access it. But it boils down to the use cases, I guess.
Use cases as well. I would say when you are building an application which is an interactive application, right? In terms of the change of one user will affect the change of other user, right? Then actually it becomes must for you to use a state management application, right, into the state management context. But I think when you're using a smaller, which is more of a client server request, right, where you are not worried about if something has changed at the back end, right, then you do like a refresh kind of a things always, right? And then you don't really worry about too much into the state management at that time, right? So when you are rendering a request kind of a things, which is just your backend request, then I think without a state management, it is okay.
Okay.
So when it's more of data consumption, you go ahead and just use GraphQL or maybe some direct consumption without local state management. But if you have interaction, like even for something as basic as to-do application, clicking on the add new item button just adds a new item in your current application, but doesn't save in the database. In that case, you would need state management in the front end.
Yeah, but yeah, I agree partially, but it for me, I can do stuff without the state management as well, because in the backend, if
see people used to build application without MVC architecture as well, right?
Yeah.
It is more about the following a good design pattern which is scalable enough for other developers to join in with your development structure, right? Otherwise, like there are other ways for you to write the code as well. It is more of a standard practice which you bring across your team, right? And then everyone follows the same pattern. It's more of a design pattern rather than discussing or hacking into the way of getting things done.
No, what Gaurav was saying, but for his architecture, GraphQL consumption and then form sends mutation query, that's good enough. But when it comes to interaction, again, like to-do application or shopping cart or things like that.
Yeah, I think when you are tightly coupling your GraphQL endpoint with a component, then it makes sense because your data pattern is directly onto the GraphQL endpoint.
Yeah, I've seen people making it really complicated with the introduction of an intermediate state management when it is not needed, which can just be done with, say, Apollo client or use GraphQL hooks. Like first, you like your Redux middleware sends an API request to GraphQL, and then the Redux store is populated, and then the component starts reading from that, which might be an overdue for most of the content consumption application, I would say.
Because those same data is already available in the GraphQL client, right? And you can directly consume it into your components. We don't have to build Redux Saga, Redux middleware, then step the reducers, and then do the stuff. So that's a bit overhead. But yeah, as I said, different use cases are there for everything. And GraphQL is a particular solution to one use case of it. And State management is required at sometimes, which I agree. If you're building a very complex application, then yeah, definitely we need to keep the data in sync, and for that you cannot handle with GraphQL itself. You have to have a state management in place.
So what you are doing is also state management, Gaurav.
Yes, but that depends upon, right? If my graph, if I want to build a component which is, I don't want to connect with GraphQL itself. Like I want to build a reusable component which I want to use it across my application. So I won't inject, like I won't integrate the GraphQL layer itself into the component. Rather than I will keep it in a separate layer, and then either through props I can pass, or I will keep a separate state which will provide the data to that thing. So in that way, that component becomes very generic for me.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Have anyone tried the GraphQL with the subscription? How will that affect into your complete architecture of the application?
I had a look at that about a year ago. So you can add a subscription, which actually just re-renders the entire component, which is listening to a particular thing. So subscription is not like, okay, this data has changed or that data has. You can add, listen to things and then refetch all the related queries, whatever has changed.
So just an event.
Yeah, it's more
not actually getting the data packets payload with that, right?
It does send, but people usually just,
It does.
yeah.
It's more kind of WebSocket only, right? It is more implemented with the help of WebSockets, the GraphQL subscription. So with whatever you can do with the WebSocket, you can do with the GraphQL subscription.
No,
and there's
that was not the question. My question was like the GraphQL endpoint, right? When you have written a complex query around the things, right? And you have fetched, let's take an example, right? So let's say you have fetched list of users, and each of the users you have fetched their address details, right? Now at the back end, one of the addresses has been updated, right? Now the subscription will monitor those objects and give you a update about those address, right? Now what will be your action point into implementing this kind of a scenario with the subscription? Sanket, what's your call on to this?
I'll start listening to all the records what I fetched. It will have an ID. I'll start listening to those particular IDs, whatever is being shown on the screen. As soon as the component mounts, as soon as the component unmounts, I'll stop listening to those particular entities, because those entities can change from anywhere, right? And that's what I mean. Complex nested structure needs to be normalized in the front end. So you need to understand the normalization again in the front end, and then add a subscription or a listener against that tuple for that particular ID. And
so how does it play a role? I'm just making this a little bit more complicated, actually, not simple, right? I'm going to add some complexity into that. So let's say, as Gaurav said, like when we are not using a state management and also using the state management with this, right? So let's say we are building a grid component and one of the record has been updated. Now, what is the ideal architecture for that with a subscription, which gives you an update onto your one of the lower data, right? The leaf node data, or I would say like your dependent or associated variables are getting changed, right? So how will you manage the listening, or the listening will be entirely through all the changes which are coming to the application, just start emitting it, right? Think through end-to-end cycle, right?
So I would actually go ahead and check all the IDs, whatever rows I have received, and then send a listener that I want, say, user with ID 1 and the post with ID 5 and post with ID 6. I want to listen to changes for those particular 3 records. And whenever any of these 3 are changed, the server sends an emit to the front end, and then I can refresh the entire query or just update that particular record. So in that case, I need to update a part of my GraphQL response. So update the cache or merge it on fly, or maybe just flush down everything and just refresh the entire thing. But yeah, again, front end store makes more sense in that case, or you'll have to manually stitch whatever is coming from the backend into your front end layer. And yeah, a lot of state manipulation will have to be done in the front end. I understand why you asking this question, Pratik, I guess, because just to make sense that the front end also needs to understand the structure and the data type of the backend if we want to go beyond just to render pages from the backend, right?
Yes, I guess I just wanted to clarify for everyone, right? Not for just myself and yourself, right? I wanted to give you an idea for everyone, how to think through this kind of a scenarios, right?
Yeah. There's a very nice article which I'll share with you, with everyone later, that talks about syncing two different devices and not sending the entire object over the wire. Like, say, if there is a huge, say, BuilderX project, that is a JSON object, that is a big, it downloads 200 KB of data once I open a project. And if some other user connects on the same project from some other system, and if I change, say a box color of a box from black to red, right? So the second user shouldn't fetch the entire project, right? So that is usually done with JSON patches. So you can, whenever something changes, I generate a patch of that and then send it to the server. Server actually merges that, applies that patch on the server data, and also sends it across to the other user. It's like just something like, at this path, this particular value has changed. So in that case, you need a mix of things, like first fetch everything from the server, and then whatever changes are done on that particular thing in the front end store, keep emitting that to the server and all the clients. I hope I made sense. I'll share that article.
Just like sending the diff only, sending only the diff which we have changed.
Correct. And JSON patch is a standard way of sending the diff of a huge, say, nested JSON object.
With JSON batch, I come to know, what if there are a lot of queries happening right in the backend because of the GraphQL. It's a single endpoint, right? And we have a very nested query, and many users are calling your backend server. So how do you handle the performance? Like, you create a batch of queries and then execute, and because at the end GraphQL boils down to joins the different schema, different tables, right? And sometimes the schema payload is very big, so the join table has a lot of records into it, right? So how do you handle such scenarios with GraphQL?
It's not specific to GraphQL again. I mean, it's the same thing with REST, because if you are querying the nested data either in REST or GraphQL, the query on the server is the same thing, right? And to reduce the load on the server, you add caching, you add proper indexes when you are joining. And if you do a proper key value sort of thing, then it becomes really fast. I think Pratik would have a better answer on this.
No, sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, how do you optimize joins in the backend?
Joins in the backend, with the GraphQL, I see it's a different strategy altogether, right? So each of the REST endpoints are at a different calls, actually, I would say, different SQL calls, right? And you have to protect your records. I would say introduce a memcache and do a row level caching onto that, right? Whenever the data changes, just cache those things. So most of your data is almost in the RAM most of the time, right? It doesn't hit to the database at all, right? That's how actually the Facebook and all the other bigger organizations do, right? They keep the active data into the RAM and ignore the database calls as much as they can.
I have a question. I think I brought this up in the last backend GD as well. How is it different than REST? Like REST and GraphQL, if we are querying the same thing, I mean, it's not related to GraphQL or REST at all, right? It's about querying or joins, and the strategy to optimize it is the same, be it REST or GraphQL. GraphQL and REST are just for the front end protocol or transformation.
No, I'm saying having one of the resource, right? One of the table read-write operation, right? Is very much simpler in terms of the actions, right? When you do a query from your GraphQL endpoint, you build a lot complex queries, and each of the user will have their own complicated set of queries, right? And that brings down the caching of those queries becomes complex and difficult, right? So it is easier to have one record cached into your RAM rather than a bunch of record where one of the user is fetching with a pagination of 10, the other user is fetching the data as a pagination of 5, right? Then you create a lot of dependency on not utilizing the cache altogether, right? You have to put that cache a little bit at the lower level then, right? And when you're using REST, you can directly actually hit the cache, right? Without
no, what I'm saying is with REST also people send back nested queries and all those things. But yeah, the flexibility what users get is less, and so the caching of each REST request would be easier compared to nested GraphQL.
And that's why whatever the GraphQL server I have seen, most of the GraphQLs have their not tightly coupled with the database layer, right? So they always hook it into one of their service providers, right? And then you call the API. So they understand the basic core layer has to be cached or somewhere into that, right? And all these GraphQL engines, the servers, are mostly aggregators, right? They aggregate all your queries, they bring out all these small chunks, and only to make sure like you are not querying too many requests from the client side, right? To reduce the number of requests coming from the client, to hold that connections, right, onto your Nginx level or onto your API server level, right? Just to reduce that burden, it is saying like, okay, send me one request. I will go and collect all the REST response from my backend servers, and will collect those things, patch it, and then give it to you, right? So the job becomes easier for the client server interaction, and it becomes single transaction of the data which is going through. You reduce your overhead calls, you reduce all your complexity of the network overhead, right? Establishing one of the connection, it takes a lot of time. So, and that's how it brings up your performance.
Makes sense.
Got it. So basically so this kind of approach we can do with microservice architecture as well, Pratik. If let's say we can create an endpoint in our REST which will be a single endpoint for the end user, and then all the requests which is coming to that endpoint we will then distribute to the different microservices, and then accumulate all the data and then send back to it. And the only difference, like the client will not have the flexibility to query much of the things like what the GraphQL provides.
No, I'm saying like when you talk about microservices architecture, in microservices, your REST API will remain over there as it is, but it will be at your backend level. None of the front end or a web application or your mobile end application will be able to access those things. They will be able to interact with your GraphQL servers, right? And the GraphQL will call those microservices internally, which will fall back onto your REST APIs, right? To collect those data, to access it and other things. And then in those ways, you can have all your data sets into your microservice architecture. It's still small, and you can keep your storage and everything independent of from one service to another service.
Okay. And I think we are running short of time, but I have one last question regarding GraphQL. Like, how do you test the things? Like, how do you test your queries or everything? Because it's a single endpoint and there can be any kind of like n number of queries it can have, right? So how do you do the testing? Like, how do you make sure? Okay.
I think Sanket is going to answer that with his new product.
So testing with, there are multiple ways. One is like always write a particular query. I mean, whenever you write a query, write a test for that. It's like just like writing any other test-driven development, or be it unit tests. So you can do that. If you want to automate that, then as I mentioned earlier, introspection API is available with GraphQL endpoints. So that checks that returns all the queries, mutation, and types which is available in your system. And then against that, you can say, okay, if I have these types available, then the test passes. If someone removes a particular type or a particular query, then the test starts to fail. So you can actually do all those things.
So, but the question is like, but let's say the query can be like any kind of query, right? Because it gives you a lot of flexibility to the client, right? They can query anything. So you just write a general use cases of the query, test cases for those general query, and then if those passes, then it's fine. Then you don't like, it's not foolproof, but it gives you some of a guarantee that yeah, my my queries will be running if such kind of scenarios come.
So the queries, what you consume in your application, just write test cases for that, because GraphQL can have like unlimited, infinite number of combinations, right? You can't write for everything.
Yeah.
You can go from user to its posts, and then from each post you can go to the owner, and then again keep nesting. Owner has post, and then post has owner. So it can go to infinite loop. But I would recommend just write the tests for the queries what you have in your front end. That should be enough. And
But
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, but I wanted to understand, like, if I'm building a query, like APIs, GraphQL APIs for like open, like how does the GitHub does? Like GitHub has a GraphQL queries which anybody can use in any form, right? There is no restriction. So how does in those scenario I have to write the test case? Or how does the test cases should be written?
So I would say check all the types, check all the queries, and request each and every field what each type has. And until you hit the cyclic dependency, circular structure, all the fields, if that works, then it's well and good. I think that should be a way to test all the properties, I would say.
I think
Yeah,
that also you guys can also make sure when you are fetching all the results, you normalize that back into the structure of the application and do a validation onto that if you are receiving the right structure or not, right? That can have your models at your front end or your client application there, right? Then fill those data from your GraphQL endpoint to your that data, and then when you are entering your application, right, you are entering from your organized model, not from the GraphQL endpoint, right? That's how you transform your data into one of the structure of the models, right? So your application never fails in terms of rendering, in terms of breaking things, right? But when you tightly coupled with the GraphQL endpoint, there might be exceptions, right? Where you can have another kind of things, right?
Correct. For me, I'm still struggling because, as you said, like as Sanket said, like testing with types and those things are one level of doing a test case, writing a test cases, but in general, in writing a foolproof, bulletproof like application, like how we do it, the TDD approach with different backend servers, which we are the REST one, we know like this endpoint will request only this kind of things, or this resources can be sent to the front end. So it's much easy to do the testing in those environments rather than in GraphQL. But yeah, I'll have to even deep dive into this.
Go ahead and sign up for this new service. I'll invite you.
Sure.
We are going to add GraphQL in like the next iteration. Right now we have REST APIs. Whenever the REST API changes, anything changes, you get a Slack notification. Something like just a second. Yeah. Sorry. So you start getting diffs like this. So this particular endpoint has removed these properties which used to exist, something like this.
Nice. This I will definitely check it out. This right now supports the REST one, right?
Yeah, it supports REST, and it's like Postman, but with a notification system. So it keeps requesting your backend, and whenever there's a change detected, it will send Slack notification like this.
Okay.
All right.
I think GraphQL generally has entities, right? Set of entities already available, right? So I think the validation throughout the entities should be sufficient.
So
the data type checking.
Yeah, the data type checking. Yeah. I think does the GraphQL allow you to share the schema of the backend to the front end layer?
It does. That's
Yes.
that is what introspection API is all about.
Okay. I just remember WDSL, right? The Microsoft web service, right? Which was which you can actually give a complete API documentation to the end user, right? And I think they all are going back to the same thing, right?
Is the same thing.
It's
So
the SOAP service, right? The WSDL file of
Yeah.
the SOAP service, and then building out the APIs call at the runtime.
So you can actually fetch schemas and then a lot of things like this thing.
So Microsoft did a right thing at that time. Now we are going back.
No, a good thing about this is that you get a really nice toolkit. Like once you have this, then there's this really nice client GraphQL. So here you get all those type ahead. Like if you type something like say name, it suggests everything. Like as soon as you type a query, which is really
Okay.
nice.
So,
And you
but you need to have that structure definition, right?
So the structure definition is in the backend with my schema file. This file.
Yeah, so I'm saying, is this shared with the client?
Yes, in the form of introspection API.
Okay.
And query schema, type name, and then query type, like there's a query, everything.
Okay. So you just shared it with the developers.
Yes, you don't share it. GraphQL automatically, GraphQL server or the plugin what you use, they expose all these, and the front end toolkit is built on that. So you get documentation over here, which is, I mean, my server is not working. You get all the documentation, all the queries and types, whatever. You can click on that, it automatically copies here, and then just play that. You don't need to even document your APIs.
Okay. Okay. Same this SOAP WSDL file, right?
Correct.
Okay.
All right. Anything else, Gaurav?
Nothing for. I think that's it for today's.
I think very limited people got involved. I think others were just listeners.
Yeah.
So let's ask people.
I have a question. So suppose, like, how do we maintain different versions of the code in GraphQL? Like, for example, what I'm currently doing is like I'm building both backend and the front end application. So whenever I have to do a breaking change to the backend, I have to update the front end app also. Like otherwise, users will not be able to use the previous version of the app. So what can we do for that? Like, can't we maintain different versions of the same code? Like 90% of the code is same, and I have updated only 10%. So we can use the same code, 90% same code, and two versions of the rest of the 10% code. Can we do something like that so that previous users who are relying on the older version of the app are also able to use the app, and those who update the app are also able to use it simultaneously?
So in my experience, Gaurav, do you have any points over here? How have you solved this one?
This I haven't solved right now because this I didn't encounter. But I'll have to give a thought on this, like how I can approach this one, because as you said, like 90% of the code is reused, then it's no point in creating another endpoint or storing a schema. But versioning,
that's one of
schema, I have to check.
I would say, sorry to interrupt, Gaurav, sorry.
Sure.
That's one of the features of GraphQL. From the spec itself, they say that you don't need versioning. If you progressively enhance your types without altering the previous ones, without deleting the previous queries, then you can go ahead and add many more and add new properties or add new resolvers as well. If you do that, if the things hasn't been renamed or removed, then it's totally fine. You don't need to maintain two different versions. But if you are removing, which you should not, or if you are renaming, which you should not again, then in that case, you'll need like V1 and V2, two different API of GraphQL. Vikram, what's your use case? I hope you're not renaming or removing.
No, actually, there was a mutation and I had to add a field to it. Like I had to add an argument to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was a required argument. I made that argument as required. So the previous version of the app, like it was not sending a required argument. So that mutation failed. But the new version, like it was working.
So there are two options for you. Either you can create a new mutation for the new type of thing, or create another endpoint for your GraphQL like V1, V2. But the recommended approach here would be to just go ahead and create a new mutation function, which has a different type of input, so that the same endpoint runs for the previous ones and the new ones also. So you have actually modified things, which you should avoid.
Okay. Good thing is that our app is still in like internal testing. People are eager to update. So
yeah. So you are free to delete the database and delete the entire GraphQL. Right?
yeah, like 2 days ago, our client deleted all the database.
Good.
That's
Got
one of the major problem, I guess, right? The version control issue, right? Overall, with the front end application, when the backend is changing quite fast.
Yes.
But yeah, that's what we were discussing, right? To provide the front end SDK to the developers, right?
Correct, but GraphQL recommends not to change, just to add new things. So nothing breaks in the previous versions also.
Okay.
I mean, GraphQL spec says that you don't need versioning.
Just like our database, like add
Correct.
more tables.
Yes,
rather
than renaming the tables.
Yes, renaming the tables. I think more of a database is pattern.
Yes, yeah, right.
Because you can join things, so it is easy. Just don't join this table to that table, right?
Right. Good. I think Aditya is around. Aditya is doing a lot of GraphQL. Questions, Aditya?
None so far.
All right. Gaurav, anything else?
Nothing from my side, I guess.
One more small question. Like it's not related to GraphQL, but it's like a general question. So suppose you have some use case and you are like expert in a programming language that is not good for that use case. So what would you prefer? Like you will like use X and like work a lot of extra to make that use case work in your particular language, or would you switch to a language that has solutions for that use case built in? Like it's just a general question. There's no wrong or right.
So I have a simple answer to that. There are two ways to think about it. From a business perspective, I think it is okay to write a lengthy things, right? But from the developers and infrastructure perspective, it is better to use a newer like language and other things.
So the answer to all the questions is it depends.
Sanket said it in a straight word. I do not want you to say that.
So it largely depends. Like if your client is saying like you have to deliver in 2 days, you even go ahead and introduce a new infrastructure which might take more than a month, right? So again, business versus do you learn things on client's expense? No, right? So there's a lot of things.
But to add a point, like you can always go ahead and like deliver the product and then later on do a refactor phase, like where you actually move out those code which is not treated. You can do a refactor phase in that and create a microservice or whatever other framework you need. It's always better to just have a sense of the product and then do the refactoring rather than
it also makes sense when say you are working at a Facebook and you are doing a application or a part of the Facebook code, right, which will be used by hundreds and thousands or millions of users, and the computation time is like 100 ms into one of the language, another language does it in 10 ms, right? When you are at a scale of a Facebook, you would always like to do at a 10 ms thing because you do not want to waste a lot of money into your infrastructure.
And on the other side, like with BuilderX, we are using PHP Laravel backend, and we had to sync to different devices. We could have introduced a Socket.io server which would have queried to PHP servers and then like established a channel between the two browsers or devices, right? But we had to focus on the core product, so we implemented a simple polling, and then we thought, okay, we'll come back to that later. So depends.
So it boils down to defense.
It depends, always works.
Gaurav, I think Rishabh has a question.
Yeah. So, what's your view on GraphQL as service like AppSync, Hasura, GraphQL, or using Node, Laravel, DB, Apollo server? So I'll definitely go with like it depends upon, as Sanket said, it depends upon use cases. So Hasura has a very good use cases. Like if you don't want to invest too much of time, ready to go products, like you just build their product and integrate, you link, you give your Postgres database IDs, and they will do all the integration part, like converting the GraphQL endpoints and everything to the Postgres thing. But GraphQL, I think it's already in a shutting phase, so I'm not very sure about it. But
yeah, so that is on down.
Yeah, and AppSync is also good, but initially for I felt like the costing goes very high in terms of like AWS services when you use AppSync. So I would prefer to go with Apollo server most of the time, because it's easy for me to integrate and build an application rather than going with AppSync. AppSync does provide a lot of flexibility for you, like it gives you a good UI where you can change your schemas on the fly and test it out, but you have to look at the business side also. Like if on the long way, it is very expensive. Did I answer your question, Rishabh?
Yeah.
So Hasura was more of a database ORM sort of, or a client ORM for databases earlier. And you know who pushed them to implement GraphQL?
You?
So yeah. All right. What else? Well, I think we can call it already over 5:30.
Yeah.
So what's your,
again meet?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So what's the bottom line, Gaurav? Conclusion.
Conclusion is like GraphQL is good, but you have to use it in a proper way, and also, like as you said, depending upon use cases, I would say like most of the use cases will fit with GraphQL, like fetching of the data. But when it comes to subscription kind of thing, which Pratik was saying, maybe we have to dig more into it and find out like what is the best practices in GraphQL. And the versioning thing which Vikram pointed out, I think it's again use cases specific. So in total, I would say like when you want to give more freedom to your client rather than giving like have a strict APIs for that, then GraphQL is better solution, and all of the use cases will be fulfilled by GraphQL. So there's no bottleneck as such in GraphQL right now. What's your point, Sanket?
Yeah, I totally agree with whatever points you made. GraphQL is a really nice toolkit which solves many of the problems which people usually face with REST. So where people struggle is usually in the backend toolkit or the front-end toolkit, but don't make that as a problem. If the toolkit of the backend or the front-end, or mainly front-end, if that doesn't work, then treat GraphQL as REST API calls, but use GraphQL in the backend, I would say. And in the front end, you can just treat them as normal REST API calls and then keep going how you would consume REST API calls. It solves most of the problems. So yeah, we are using it. And Pratik, do you have some final words here?
I would say like make your call based on the application, right? What kind of an application you are going to build, how complex this application will be, what are the different types of use cases of your GraphQL endpoint, right? Make calls. And also the other thing is, I would say is don't fall for one of the points, REST or GraphQL. I think judge them betterly, right? And then make a decision based on your time frame, your learning experience, how fast you can deliver onto the things, right? and also think through a little bit on a future of your application, where it is heading for your development, right? So it might be like today you are using REST, and the future you might be have to switch back to GraphQL, right? Then at that point, I would say make that judgment today to use GraphQL. Investing early is okay, but do not dig too much into your thought process of saying, okay, I should use A or B option or C option, right? Get started with your development faster, and each and every of the options is workable in most of the scenarios, right? It doesn't have a complication. So think through of your choices with your application requirements directly.
So what Pratik is
And
saying,
later,
don't make it your religion. Like React is my religion, or Flutter is my religion, or
Yes, that's true.
And we should end all our GDs with 2 words, I guess. It depends.
it depends to the use cases.
Depends. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Take care. We'll see you in the next GD then. Cool.
Yeah. Okay. Bye,
Okay.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye, guys.